Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to some more of my immediate reactions. And I had to take a week off because of exams, and also because of other stuff going on, like papers to write and whatnot. But I'm back, and this time we're going to have a double feature, and this is going to feature the April Fool's episode of Rick and Morty, as well as the new episode of Samurai Jack. But to do this, I also needed Szechuan sauce to get myself going. So either way, the first one, as you can tell, is going to be about Rick and Morty. And this was really a great episode. I do love the way that they just keep you guessing as to what was real and what was not. And the subplot here was, or the original plot was, when we last left off, that Rick turned himself into the galactic prison in order to save his family from living a shitty life. And then you see Rick at the Shoney's explaining how he got out of prison, but then it turns out that was a memory in his mind. I do like how they make fun of Inception in the episode of Lawnmower Dog, and then they kind of use the same concepts here as to what's a memory and what's not. I mean, that's just kind of one of the things that Rick and Morty's always good at, and that's also just a product of terrific writing. But either way, you get these memories of Rick at the Shoney's and then the alien that's interrogating him. And then I do like how there's kind of a virus that Rick uploads that he can switch bodies with the alien. And then that's kind of a recurring theme throughout this episode. But either way, more importantly, where it all started was where it was in 1998 when Mulan came out. And also they had, McDonald's had that Szechuan sauce that they used for the McNuggets. I mean, I do love how that was kind of a recurring theme too. And then what you see next is Rick with his wife and Beth, and you do see middle-aged Rick or another middle-aged Rick show up and basically explain to him that the portal gun was really his way of just being able to do whatever he wants with little consequences possible, which kind of sums up Rick pretty well. And then you'll also see later on just what really drives him. But anyway, what you see next is a part where Morty and Summer are then trying to rescue Rick, and then Morty then is basically trying to warn Summer against rescuing Rick just because the only thing is that Rick doesn't really care about anything at all, and he is kind of right there. But then there's also a plot point where Jerry's actually very successful at his new job, which is kind of nice to see. I mean, Jerry was more or less the punching bag of the whole series, and I do kind of like that, you know, Jerry finally gets something good for himself, and unfortunately that doesn't last long, as you see later on. But what happens is that Morty and Summer end up finding the dead Rick and the dead Morty from the Rick Potion number 9 episode, and then end up getting Rick's portal gun that way. So then the security droid that was there ends up chasing them down. And then they end up going to the universe where Rick Potion number 9 happened. And then they end up finding like this caveman version of Summer and Beth and Jerry. Which of course Morty was not there because he ended up leaving. So then you kind of get to see like the consequences of what Rick does. And then Morty kind of explains this to Summer too. That these are the parts of Rick's adventures that you don't see, which is basically the bad things that happen, and then he just jumps ship whenever it does. But then, moving back to the main plot, you see Rick end up switching bodies with the aliens, and then they just end up getting different clearance. And then later on, a council of Ricks that are from an alternate universe end up showing up, and they basically find Morty and Summer when they detect the portal gun getting destroyed by Jerry. And then what you see next is that the Council of Ricks head over to the prison where Rick is being held and then try to kill him. But then Rick was able to use this laser to switch bodies with people, kind of on the fly, and then he just ends up getting out of there with, I don't really remember which body it is, but it doesn't really make much of a difference. But then you see Morty and Summer at this trial, and then that's basically just their loyalty to Rick, and then That's just their loyalty of handling or illegal possession of a portal gun or something like that. But then, I do like the way the Council of Ricks kind of handle that, like, just the way they treat others and then just the way they treat themselves. But then, Morty then says, like, the main thing Rick hates is himself, and that is kind of true, though. But then you see, during the trial, like when Rick escapes from prison and then he ends up trying to go to the Council of Ricks and then ends up switching bodies with one of the other Ricks in charge. And then, what I did like was the way, they handled, like, teleporting them into the prison. And then just all hell breaks loose, and then you just see a bunch of people dying, and then a bunch of the Ricks end up dying. Which I don't really know what the consequences of that would be, but then again, this is Rick we're talking about, so it's not like he gives a damn. But then what I did really like about this episode was just the way, like, total chaos ensues, and then just the way, like, Morty and Summer kind of do care about each other. And then just, like, why they decide to go on these adventures with Rick in the first place, even though they know that it's not going to be normal. Although one of my favorite parts was, the standoff at the end where you see, or near the end, when you see one of the Ricks take Summer hostage. And then you see Rick gave this gun to Morty, and then he does this standoff, and then everybody starts insulting Morty. And then he just ends up shooting Rick, and then it turns out the gun was a fake, and then the note says, "Fake gun Morty cause a standoff," and then it was also pretty funny when Morty actually didn't notice that. It turned out he just did it on his own. But I mean, that's just one of those other parts where the show just decides to make fun of Morty for whatever reason. I mean, that's something that does always make me laugh. And then, of course, we get the... Well, then there's the part at the end when Rick when Rick can overthrow the alien government by devaluing the currency that they have. And also, if anybody gets any ideas, that might be useful to know in the future. But either way, you do get to see Jerry crawling away when the aliens kind of turn on each other, where it's like and then I also like that part in The Office where, like, the aliens just start taking all the pants, and then one of them screams, "He who controls the pants controls the future!" I mean, that's just a part that just made me laugh pretty hard. But then after that, Jerry just crawls home to Beth, and then he just goes, "I just kept crawling, and it kept working." And then I also like how, I forgot the teacher's name, or Morty's teacher. Yeah, I forgot his name for some reason, but then I also like how he's, like, leading the rebellion against aliens. I mean, he's a pretty cool character anyway. Just can't remember his name for whatever reason. But either way, you do get to the end, and then Jerry just decides it's either him or Rick, and then it turns out that Beth ends up choosing Rick over Jerry. But then you kind of get this part at the end where Rick is then lecturing to Morty that Jerry crossed him, so then he got rid of him. And then it turns out that the whole reason Rick is doing all of this is for that Mulan McNugget sauce. And then he just goes on this whole rant of, like, "I want that McNugget sauce, Morty!" And then that was actually something I was laughing like hell during watching that whole part. But then, I also saw, like, on Reddit and then on Yahoo, like, the next day, like, how Szechuan sauce was, like, one of the most searched terms. I mean, that's just, definitely says a lot about how, a TV show can influence the internet and vice versa. I don't know, that's just definitely things worth thinking about. But either way, I'm just going to just say that this was a really awesome episode, and also just really well written, and just did so many things right. I mean, that's just what Rick and Morty is always good for. But anyway, now that that's done with, it's about 10 minutes, so stay tuned for the Samurai Jack episode. I'm just going to go get my notes, and then I'll see you soon. Although I did forget to mention the return of Phoenix Person. Yes, that's a bird person revived as a robot or a cyborg or something. And then he becomes a Phoenix person, and of course, I guess Tammy still loves him. So there's that to look forward to when Rick and Morty Season 3 officially kicks off. And we're back with more of the immediate reaction to the episode of Samurai Jack last night. Getting this out kind of late just because, I mean, it's been a late night, and then also between that and UFC yesterday, oh well, things come out late. Let's see, it starts with Jack falling, and then there's kind of a dream of a sequence of Aku attacking him. But then it's heavily implied in the trailer of the episode that they fell into the creature, but then it turns out that didn't happen. But then again, that was a little bit deceiving, but then again, that's just what a trailer's supposed to do, is just bait you into watching. But either way, what happens is you see Jack on the field with a bunch of the trees and the snow and all that stuff, and then you see a bunch of these crows, and they're all shouting, "Murder! Killer!" Those kind of things. I mean, that's just kind of the guilt that Jack feels over killing some of the daughters of Aku, and then, unfortunately, that's just the way that had to go. And then Jack even said the same thing. He said they chose the path, and they kind of get what they deserve. But either way, this episode wasn't quite as intense as the other 3 episodes, but then again, it was still very good. I mean, didn't have the same kind of action, but it was still a really good episode because it kind of shows that, with all the shit that he's been through, there's still definitely a lot of good left in Jack. And either way, you get to see this when Ashy, who survived, ends up attacking Jack again, and he just ends up tying her up with a chain and then just left her at the tree. Although I also liked when, sorry. I also do like that, this is probably the funniest Jack has been since, the episode of Jack vs. Aku, where, again, Ashley's just talking shit about how Jack needs to be killed and all that stuff, and then eventually Jack just shuts her up and says, "You're programmed with all this hate," and then eventually he just says, "Well, now you're just repeating yourself." And then I just got a good laugh out of that line. But then again, I got a good laugh out of a lot of Jack's lines in this episode. But then you see some weird creature open his mouth, and then both of them fall in, and he then chooses to save her, even though she's still tied up with the chains. And immediately you get flashbacks to the episode of him with the dragon, when he has to go inside the dragon and find out what the heck is causing all his digestive problems. But then you get these spider-like creatures attacking them, and then it turns out that even though he saves him, that bitch is still attacking him, which is exactly what I wrote down in my notes. And it really says a lot about how unwilling people are to change their beliefs when they're showed contradictory information, and really says a lot about just the way beliefs can be ingrained into people, and just how rock solid they can be. I mean, that always works for better or worse, and unfortunately we're seeing that in spades nowadays. Well, not really in spades, but we're definitely seeing that aloud nowadays. Well, then again, that is nothing new. I mean, a bunch of those other beliefs and a bunch of those other things existed for a while now. Doesn't really matter what civilization it is at the end of the day. Those things still exist because they're still human. But either way, now that I got that rant out of the way, you kind of get to see these, well, I mean, Ashley does tell him that, eventually this is a monolithic creature. And then, you get to see this other part with, Ashley and Jack together, and then, eventually Ashley gets this flashback that says, or that gets the order from, I guess, her mother that says, "Kill the samurai." And then eventually you see Jack on the other side talking with what looks like this pollen thing or cotton ball thing. I mean, that's just kind of what I wrote down. It kind of reminded me of the story of Pandora's box, when after she opened the box and all the bad stuff flew out, there was that one little thing at the bottom, and then that was supposed to represent hope or something. And I'm kind of guessing that's what the pollen ball was supposed to be. Was just the good in Jack's or the good left in Jack's conscience. And then it's kind of the same parallel there. But then you get this hallucination of a younger Jack, and then basically telling him that, you know what, she chose her path, she's just trying to kill you, just go ahead and let her die. I mean, it's not exactly the same thing, but then the pollen ball also said, you know the way out, just go ahead and go there. And then he said he really can't without saving her. And then after some kind of crab-like creature attacked her, he ends up rescuing her again and then just said, you're welcome. And then that's kind of like the mix of when Ikro was there, but then again, that was just a coup in disguise. But then afterwards, they start trying to just get their way out, and then, of course, Ashi's just giving Jack a lot of shit and talking a lot of shit to him, and eventually he just sits her down and then just goes off on her about how Aku is really the evil one, and then everything you've ever been taught, everything you know, everything you think is also wrong. And that's really, again, just a nice, or just a pretty severe message as to I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I guess it's I guess being in her shoes, that what happens when you're taught to believe all of these things, and then you end up meeting the thing you're supposed to hate, and then they just end up just telling you that everything you know is wrong. And it's really the philosophical crisis here. You just don't know who to believe and who not to believe. But then again, I don't know. I guess I'll touch on that more as this reaction goes on. But then you see, like, for some reason it's raining needles, and I also did find it humorous that when they hid in the cave, and then Jack knew about acupuncture, and then said like how a bunch of people would pay to do that, and it is something I've done before, and it's probably worth your while, actually. And then the further they go, you get to see like these worms, and then I also do like how Jack made a snazzy new armor from the worm's parts, or from the worm's exoskeleton, I suppose. And then, of course, Ashi's just insulting him some more, and then he just pretty much said, well, compared to everything you said, hideous is actually a compliment, or acceptable, so thank you. And then that's just another one of Jack's lines that gave me a good laugh. And then they're on the verge of getting out, and then you see a bunch of these flying creatures that are definitely give me a reminder of that dragon episode, as well as the episode where Jack ends up losing his clothes and ends up in Wonderland for some reason. And that's one thing I really liked about those two episodes, were the kind of creatures that they created, and just like how creative those episodes were as a whole. But anyway, as they're on the verge of getting out, you see that part that was featured in the trailer, which was use the flying creatures to escape, don't fall in the pool of acid. Sounds simple enough. But then it actually was simple enough until this flying skeleton fish thing just shows up and starts attacking all the creatures. And then you see Jack about to fall and then grabbing onto another one, and then you see another creature like fling him to another one. And then eventually, like, these green glowy jellyfish type things end up getting him out, and then of course he has to jump at the last possible second. But then it turns out they were on like some kind of spiky tortoise creature or something like that, and I don't know, that's just kind of what I got out of it. They didn't really show much of it, but then again, I guess that was ambiguous for a reason. So they then end up on this island, and then and of course Ashi's gonna kill him again, and you know, the whole time I'm just thinking, you are such a bitch, but then again, that's just the way she was raised. I mean, she was raised with a purpose of killing Jack, so at the end of the day, I don't really blame her for being such a bitch, but oh well, I just felt that way this whole episode. But anyway, you get this flashback to when she's training with one of the other ones, and this ladybug flies by, and then the master then just kills a ladybug and says it's just a distraction and not part of Aku's plan, or not part of Aku's order. But then eventually, when she sees Jack treating the ladybug well and just letting it fly by, she ends up dropping the sickle, and then you kind of see that she actually does have a heart, unlike, I guess that's kind of the tough part with raising an actual living being in order to try and kill Jack, is that eventually you do have to deal with things like compassion and, I guess, other variables that you don't have to account for with robots. Well, except for X9, but that's a completely different story for a completely different time. But then you get, in the trailer for the next episode, there's this raid on Aku's castle, and we get the long-awaited return of the Scotsman, and that is going to be awesome. So either way, further thoughts on this episode was, let's see, getting back to just the way Ashi and Jack interacted, and unfortunately that is also part of the perception that Ashi was given, was that since she was exposed to so few things besides just training to kill Jack, I mean, eventually this whole being in the outside world is still kind of a culture shock to her, and just having Jack just explain why everything that she knows is wrong and everything she was taught was wrong, and like I said before, that's just another huge shock to somebody, and it really does beg the question, like, what it would take for somebody to change their beliefs about somebody. I mean, no matter how much contradictory information they're given, like, when do people finally admit they're wrong about something? And as somebody who's looking to get into the exercise science field, that's definitely something that I'm probably going to have to be faced with a lot of the times as my life goes on. So, I mean, that should be interesting to explore that issue now. I mean, that's just definitely some food for thought on this Sunday afternoon, because that's when I'm recording this. But then, I don't know, I guess it's just, I don't know, for me, I guess it's just, expose yourself to as much as you can, and just try and pick and choose what's right and what's wrong, and I don't know, I guess I could, probably somebody much better at articulating that could, probably comment on that, but, yeah, we'll just see how that goes. So yeah, I think that's about it, so I'll, see you guys next week.